She's an award-winning actress who consistently shows up to fight for human rights. And it seems Angelina Jolie has instilled her unwavering desire to help those in need onto her own family as daughters Shiloh, 11, and Zahara, 13, joined their mother during a tour of the Zayda Ari refugee camp in Jordan on Sunday. The 42-year-old humanitarian said that her daughters asked to come with her to meet with Syrians displaced from the country's ongoing civil war, which began nearly 7 years ago, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. "My daughters Zahara and Shiloh asked to come with me today," Angelina said. "They've spent time today speaking and playing with children their own age who have been forced from their homes, whose family members have been killed or have disappeared, and who are struggling with trauma and illness, but who at the end of the day are just children, with the same hopes and rights as children in any other nation." This visit was Shiloh's third trip and Zahara's first time visiting a refugee camp, according to People magazine. Angelina called on the international community to end the senseless Syrian conflict as the war enters its 8th year. The Hollywood A-lister criticized the lack of a credible political and diplomatic process to bring the violence to an end. Speaking in her role as Special Envoy of UN High Commissioner for Refugees, the actress also met Syrian children displaced by the war at the Zayda refugee camp in Jordan. Children crowded around as she spoke in a patch of muddy space between hundreds of rows of caravans in the cold desert camp, less than an hour's drive from the Syrian border. It was Jolie's 5th visit to Jordan and 3rd to the Zayda refugee camp. "It is heartbreaking to return to Jordan and witness the levels of hardship and trauma among Syrian refugees as the war enters its 8th year," she said. "We in UNRWA are deeply grateful to the Jordanian people, for their generosity and humanity towards the victims of the conflict." Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, and Iraq now host nearly 5.5 million Syrian refugees between them. They really are an example to the world, at a time when solidarity with refugees is in short supply. We should be under no illusions that this is a crisis that has been out of control for years. The actress said most Syrian refugees had exhausted any savings they had and the vast majority were surviving on less than $3 a day. She said, "This means families going without sufficient food, children unable to get medical treatment, young girls vulnerable to early marriage and many Syrians facing their 7th winter without proper shelter." The 42-year-old movie star then called on world powers to find a viable political settlement to end Syria's civil war, saying that was the only way to end the human suffering and the strain on host countries. "Humanitarian aid is not a long-term solution," she explained. "And to be clear, no one wants to get off aid relief more than Syrian families. For such an educated, capable people, it is soul-destroying to be made this dependent." She added, "We should never forget that the war began with demands by Syrians for greater human rights. Peace in their country has to be built on that. It cannot be built on impunity for the targeting of civilians by all sides, the bombing of schools and hospitals, barrel bombs, torture, chemical weapons and rape used as a weapon of war. It must be built on accountability, for instance, justice and recognition for the years of violence that women in Syria have faced. So that is my message to the international community today. Yes, of course, please do more to help meet the needs of desperate Syrian families, and the countries hosting them. But above all, please provide the leadership and strength needed to negotiate a principled end to this senseless war without sacrificing the dignity and human rights of Syrian families. That is non-negotiable." The Zayda refugee camp opened in 2012. 1 year after the anti-government protests turned violent in Syria, and is the largest refugee camp in Jordan, housing almost 80,000 Syrian refugees, with many of the residents having lived there for several years. Jordan hosts more than 650,000 registered Syrian refugees, according to the UN Refugee Agency.